Good morning, everyone. I am so grateful that you're here with me today. My name is Almudena, for those of you that don't know me. I love to start with this slide because this is one of my dogs when she was a lot younger. And the anecdote before this photograph is that we had some of our friends coming and they were returning some of our camping equipment that we lent to them. And they left it in the garage. Rio had access to the garage and she decided, hey, why not? You know, I'm just going to bring up the bag of coal and see if I can bring it through the doggy door. So as you see, professional trainers, we also have issues with naughty dogs. Personally, I have a lot of leeway for naughtiness. I love dogs that are naughty. They show me their potential. They give me ideas on what I need to work with. But at the end of the day, we all have sometimes to figure out why is it that our dog is behaving in a certain manner. So let's begin by looking at the problems. And one of the questions that I would ask is a problem according to whom? And of course, it's according to us. Our dogs rarely have a problem with how they behave. And their experience of our world is quite different from our own experience in our own world. So that is something important for us to acknowledge from the get-go. It is according to us. Now, let's look at what most people want in their dogs. And you might relate to all of these or some of them. A quiet dog, a dog that barely barks or only barks when it's appropriate, quote unquote. A dog that comes when called every time. And this is one of my favorite peeves because, you know, I've had sometimes clients tell me, I want my dog to come to me every time. And my answer to them is, what do you do with 100% certainty? And the answer is that we don't. We have bigger brains and our response really falls short to being 100% on the mark. Chew only dog things. We expect our dogs to have the discrimination between the baby's toys and their toys. Relax after a leash walk. And even though leash walks are actually good for our dogs and the best benefit for them is actually being able to sniff around, they're not getting a lot when it comes to physical exertion. Of course, there's always exceptions. There are dogs that are recuperating, senior dogs. But for the most part, a leash walk is very little in the way that what dogs need in general to be able to get their physical needs met. Do not chase the kids, the cat, or moving objects, including cars. And as we're going to see later on, this is really linked to a series of behaviors. Do not be aggressive or scary. Be okay with being alone as needed. It could be 2 hours, it could be a day, and you know what? You, of course, don't know when I'm coming back, but you need to be okay with that. Do not pull on the leash. This personally is one of my pet peeves. I don't like it when my dogs pull on the leash. That's something that I'm really adamant to not let happen. And be nice to everyone, dogs and people. And I don't know about you, but I'm not nice to everyone all the time, especially if I don't like them. But here we are having that expectation of our dogs. Now let's find out what we do know about dogs. We know that it's all chew toys to them. So before I presented to you what we want, which is know what to chew, if they have something available that is appropriate. But for them, chewing is a natural behavior that needs to be satiated, and they're going to chew whatever is available to them. Self-interest, no desire to please. And I'm going to stop here for a moment because this is a really important one. When I tell my clients, or a client says to me, hey, well, I want my dog to do X because I want them to do it because they love me. And I explain to them that the love of the dog or the bond that we have of our dogs or them towards us is not in debate. That's not the issue. However, we do need to recognize that if any animal that is alive has its self-interest as its first priority. And this is just evolutionarily advantageous. So our dogs are not different from that. And it is important because the more that we can see dogs for who they are versus a projection of us, our needs, our wants, the better a relationship is going to be, and also much fairer, I would say. We know they have smallish brains, especially if we compare them to ours, that they learn basically by classical and operant conditioning. And this is a topic that really fascinates me, but of course, we won't be discussing this today. They're predators. And this is going back to the chasing. Why is that they're chasing the child or cars? This is predation, which is not aggression. I know a lot of people think that, say, for example, when a herding breed goes into that typical herding breed position, that it's being, and it's looking like it's targeting another dog at the dog park, people think, well, the dog is being aggressive. It is not aggression. Predation is food acquisition behavior. And you can see here, there's many discrete behaviors that form this chain. So when our dog, being a herding breed or any other dog, is chasing the cat, chasing the car, it's again exercising natural behaviors. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that you have to say, oh, well, okay, and what do I do about that? Of course, we need to find ways that we can ameliorate. And this is what this presentation is about. They're amoral, no sense of right or wrong. So the idea that a dog knows that it's bad because it peed, because he had no access to go outside, is actually erroneous. And I would argue very sad. Dogs want to feel safe. Any animal wants to feel safe. Their number one priority. So when people, for example, say, well, my dog knows it's bad, or that I'm upset at it because it's acting in a way that looks guilty, what the dog is doing, the dog is feeling threatened by the voice of the person, or the posture of the person towards them, and they're appeasing. So appeasing is really different than feeling guilty. And you know what? We all sometimes label the wrong behavior or have these conversations with others or with ourselves. So it's something just to keep abreast of. What else do we know about dogs? That they form they're very, very social, and they don't do well in isolation. Also, they have a finite socialization period, and I think everybody is aware of that. It starts at 3 weeks of age and goes roughly to 18 weeks of age. And I want to define socialization as a presentation of a stimulus that has as a result a positive association. So presenting a bunch of stimuli to a puppy or a dog without really looking for that positive association is not going to create the socialization that we're looking for. They're also opportunistic and skin scavengers. A scavenger is an animal that would eat something it has not killed. So if we go back to our household, this is why your dog is raiding your trash can. This is why your dog is stealing the wonderful hors d'oeuvres spread that you have for your guests that are showing up in 5 minutes. Because for them, they're going to eat whatever they find. And it's, again, they're scavengers, so they don't have to kill it in order to consume it. Aggression is ritualized. And this is an important concept to really understand. What I mean with aggression being ritualized, it means that there's a lot of posturing and vocalization in order to hopefully not get into a full-blown attack. So if you think of it at this from an evolutionary standpoint, if an animal is injured, that animal will die. In other words, it will not reproduce. So again, in most species, aggression is going to be very ritualized before a full-on attack is presented. And they also have a very well-developed olfactory system, that being their main sense of how they understand the world, with the visual sense second. Well, now let's look a little bit at our colliding worlds, the human world and the canine nature. Very different propositions. So here's our modern life. We have limitations on resources, such as time, energy, exhaustion. And I sympathize with a lot of my clients. Many times I'm out there training dogs, come home. Now I have to do something with my own dogs, either provide them with mental stimulation. I do fitness training sessions with my dogs at least 3 times a week. And sometimes I really don't want to do it, but I realize after I'm done, I'm going to be happy that I did. And my dogs are definitely better for it. Money. If you ever engage in private training, you're probably going to spend a lot of money. So it's another resource that not everybody has. And the know-how. I think people in general really want to do more with their dogs, just like that survey was shown us, but they really don't know what to do, or they think it's too difficult, too time consuming. So this is an important thing for us to also consider. So now let's talk a little bit about dogs in our world. What does that look like? They are dependent on us as their social group. And of course, as a social group, it's whoever the dog lives with, including any resident dogs. They need daily access to legal outlets so that they can express natural behaviors. One of the things that I find absolutely fascinating, and of course gives me a bunch of joy, is that when I start working with somebody and we start putting very simple things in place so that that dog gets its daily needs met, and suddenly the dog behaves better, and the client is obviously happier with the dog, happier with me, everybody wins. Safety. And again, I mentioned that safety is the #1 concern for any animal. I want to spend a couple of minutes here with advocacy, because this is something that sometimes I feel people don't understand that they should be doing for their dogs, especially those dogs that are anxious or fearful. So by advocacy, what I mean is, if you know, for example, that your dog does not like to be petted by others, don't put your dog in a position where it will. Or if somebody says to you, oh my God, your dog is so cute, can I pet him? And you feel a little weird, right? We have been socialized to be social to others, to be polite. So we feel like, okay, I can't say no. So we say yes. And your poor dog pays the price for that. So we can be very polite and very firm about what goes down with our dogs and other people or other people's dogs. This is, of course, not always possible, but I feel that if we have this idea present, it is going to be a lot easier for us to be able to advocate for our dogs when that is needed. And of course, they depend on us for their comfort and their well-being. And these are minimal requirements for having a dog that is leading a thriving life versus just living, say. Now, I want to jump here a little bit into the nitty-gritty of this conversation, if you will. So let's look at a couple of definitions that I think are going to help you understand how you can better live with your dog harmoniously and help your dog out. So management means, as it says, the control of the environment. In other words, the dog is really not learning a lot when a situation is just being managed. And management is very good in certain circumstances. So what I'm saying is that you don't always have to have like a full behavior modification plan. Sometimes management is appropriate. So for example, let's say that your dog is begging at the table. We're not going to go into the whys, okay? None of my business, but that's what's happening. And you decide, hey, I'm done with this. I want to make sure that the dog stops begging at the table. Well, you can put that dog in another room or in a crate with a chewy. That is management. Your dog technically is not learning anything, but it's not able to continue to rehearse that behavior that you don't like anymore. Behavior modification and training, they kind of go together. Training is the bolts, nuts and bolts of it, and behavior mod is sort of the result. As a result of a good implemented behavior modification plan or training plan, your dog should learn alternative behaviors. So instead of, for example, begging at the table, you might teach your dog, go lie down on the bed, and your dog is getting reinforced for staying on that bed. I mean, how flashy is that? Also, when we're doing a behavior modification plan, we must satisfy the dog's needs. And I'll say this a little bit more in a couple of slides. And we also need to recognize, or I need to recognize as a pro, that it needs to be acceptable and doable for the parent. Sometimes I work with clients, and what I'm thinking for them is, as a part of a recall come when called, I want the clients to run away from the dog. That's very efficient, very effective. However, If I have an elderly client, well, that's not going to work. I need to come up with something better for that situation. So, creating harmony at home with our dogs. Change your perspective and you'll see results. Wow. And this is why I wanted to add a lot of education here, because I really think it's important. And again, all of us humans, a lot of the times we think that things are about us and our dogs should revolve around us. And I would say, again, that is a disservice to our dogs. Acknowledge their nature. So first off, we need to know, what are they made of? What do they really need? And not only your particular dog, of course, but all dogs in general. Be empathetic. And I'm defining empathy as seeing things from the perspective of the other. So, and I mean, there's so many examples I can give, even of my own life. So I need to call myself sometimes on the carpet on this, because sometimes I'm upset that my dogs are barking when I'm trying to work. Well, that is their job. And again, a little more on that later. But sometimes I fail and I act like a human, self-involved. And sometimes I go, whoa, wait a second, you know better. What can you do to help the situation? Let's have appropriate expectations and responsibilities on the dog. Here's an example that really actually happened to a client. They called me about, they had two dogs. They called me about their recall. So one of the dogs' recall was apparently pretty okay or good, and the other one was the naughty one. Just before we started working together, the one that had no recall problem got killed by a car. So absolutely terrifying. But this is a good example of how if those clients would have kept that dog on the leash with traffic, or come up with another solution so that the dog did not have the opportunity to run into traffic, that dog would be alive today. So we need to, again, understand their nature and have expectations, but they need to be appropriate. The same with a young child. You know, if I go to a home where there's a dog and they want some changes and they have small kids, I can ask a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old to take the responsibility that the parents should have. Now, is your dog misbehaving, or it has bigger fish to fry? A lot of the times our dogs are suffering from fear, from anxiety, and they engage in behaviors that, of course, again, from our perspective, it's misbehaving. Why are you nipping? Why are you barking in the crate? Why are you having accidents? It could be that the poor dog has a UTI infection, right? So we need to, again, when we see that our dog is misbehaving from our perspective, we need to take a step back and say, okay, is my dog misbehaving? Or perhaps my dog is feeling anxious, is feeling upset for something, or there's other environmental situations, such as the dog has a medical condition and it cannot control the elimination in the home. So here's a couple of examples. Jumping on people. Dogs jump to say hello. It's a pro-social behavior. From our perspective, and again, I'm not saying, hey, live with it. You know, I don't care if your clothes get messed up, or, you know, it's an elderly person, it's on the ground. Of course, that's not okay. But if we understand why the dog is jumping on us, then we can ideally put something in place that will satisfy that social need of, hey, are we okay? Say that we go out, come back home, and the dog is jumping on us or our friends. So first off, recognize that it's a pro-social behavior. That is the motivation that we're dealing with. So don't scold, instead redirect or train an alternative. Now, this alternative needs to have that social component that I was talking about. And there's so many ways of doing this. So for example, say that you come into your home and your dog is going to jump on you. You know that's going to happen, but perhaps your dog can retrieve a ball and bring it to you. Maybe you can teach him a trick. The dog can be spinning and jumping, or maybe the dog goes between your legs. And these are things that, of course, one needs to train. So there are ways that we can present a new behavior, train a new behavior so that the dog cannot continue with the jumping, but at the same time, it's getting what it needs, which is that social interaction. So here's the options that I was presenting. Let's talk about barking. Oh my God, who does not like barking? Barking is a juvenile trait in wolves. In other words, adult wolves do not bark. Now, with domestication and tameness came barking. So in other words, we selected for barking when we were taming dogs gazillion years ago. There is an individual in how much a particular dog will bark, and it has to do with, of course, the breed of the dog and the context of the barking. Like any behavior, barking can be reinforced by accident. So say, for example, that I have a dog, I'm on the phone and my dog is barking at me, which that doesn't happen, thank God, but pretend. And I turn and go, Fifi, just a minute, I'm on the phone. Don't you see that I'm on the phone? And Fifi saying, awesome. She stopped talking on the phone and now is paying attention to me. So there I'm thinking that I'm helping the situation, but I'm actually not. Just like that, we can modify barking. Now, something important to consider, whenever we think about any natural innate behavior, it is so much easier to modify than to think that we're going to quench that behavior for good. So again, many times people, what they want is a quick fix. Forget about that. Quick fixes are rare when it comes to behavior. So we need to bite the bullet, look at who the dog is, and then take it from there. So barking, there are so many reasons why dogs bark. So again, it's context specific. So if it's demand barking, as my example of my wonderful Fifi, I don't have a dog Fifi, you can teach an alternative behavior. You can implement a well-executed timeout. And again, there is a protocol for this. I'm not going to go into it right now, but it's a very efficient way and it's very clear to the dog. Or you can remove the dog from the situation. So for example, I was a little panicky that perhaps my dogs would be barking while I'm presenting this. So I had to move my presentation elsewhere so that I'm not interrupted. Watch dog barking. Manage the environment. Perhaps your dog is barking because it has access to a street and it's barking at every single person that goes by, every squirrel. If that dog does not have access to that window, at least for some time, that barking will subside. Train a bark and cue. So you see, these are examples of managing and training and managing and training together, or teach an alternative behavior. There's a training plan that I really love that it teaches dogs that when they hear a doorbell or a knock on the door, which is typical for dogs to very readily associate that with somebody coming in. So I teach the dog to, instead of getting crazy and barking and lunging and doing whatever it's doing that is upsetting everybody, the dog starts searching for food. So this is an example of using an alternative behavior that is incompatible with the behavior that we want to modify. Mouthy and rude behaviors. Again, personally, I love this kind of work because it's easy to resolve if we know what we're doing. So maybe your dog is being mouthy when it's playing. I would argue that possibly your dog is over-aroused or has had not enough stimulation. So it has a lot of pent-up energy. Maybe it's anxious. Maybe it has spent too much time alone and you're back and it's like, oh my God, glad to see you. Or it has not learned an alternative. So here we are getting the dog over-aroused and then the dog gets mouthy, but we haven't taught the dog how to respond to that behavior or that stimulation. Destructive behaviors. Your flower bed, an excellent place to dig or hide my bone. Again, digging and hiding are natural behaviors for dogs that are rewired. And they see a flower bed, right? Colliding worlds. You just spend a bunch of money. It looks awesome. You're super happy with your flower bed. And boom, here comes the dog. Thanks for that. Love the soil. You know, it's very easy for me to just dig in. I don't have to work really hard. Your expensive shoes, cold hands, soft leather. I love them. Thank you for bringing those shoes. Absolutely clueless that you just spend a bunch of money on the shoes and you would like to use them more than once. I'm sorry, I'm managing an alarm here. And when there's an absence, you know, your dog has been left alone to its own devices. Perhaps your dog is actually anxious of being left alone, what is called separation distress, or your dog is does not have, it has a lot of energy because you didn't have time to really train your dog or work with the dog. So now you come home and you have a redecorated household. So here's my recap. Let's learn about dogs and their needs and their natures. Let's provide them with a daily legal outlets so that that cluster of normal dog behavior that really annoys us gets under some control. Let's exercise empathy and assume responsibility where it's due. Let's manage the environment to avoid unwanted behaviors. And let's teach our dog an alternative, an acceptable and safe ways of behaving. Now, at this point, you might say, oh, great presentation, love it, great advice. I don't know where to start. And I get it. You know, before I was a trainer, I didn't know where to start either. Love my dogs, but didn't know where to start. So I'm here to propose something that I hope is going to help you. It is called the C.H.A.C.O's monthly training subscription program. So I created this program because, as I was mentioning before, a lot of my clients tell me, I want to do more, but I am really at a loss. I don't have the time. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to keep moving forward once we're doing some of the training. So this is what the program looks like. Together, we work on everyday life skills. So those are things that happen sometimes in the home, a lot of the times out and about. And these are things that, again, most people want to have a better situation with their dog. We also work on training games that will provide a bunch of mental stimulation. And one of the things I noticed, yes, of course, dogs do have physical requirements. But I also noticed that what it's missing most in most dogs' lives is mental stimulation. And in addition, when we provide that, suddenly the dogs are more mellow. And then canine fitness. I am a canine strength and fitness coach. I don't do rehab, but as I was saying, I engage with fitness with my own dogs and sometimes with my clients' dogs. And I have noticed that when we do this, it can totally help change a dog that is fearful, anxious, lacks confidence. And I'm sorry that I'm using labels right now that I'm not describing in the effort of ending soon. And at the same time, when we start teaching the dog fitness, they get a wonderful physical workout as well as a mental stimulation aspect to it. So this is how the program works. It's 3 behaviors a month, every month delivered to your inbox. Includes different levels of proficiency and progressions for those 3 particular behaviors that month. And this is going to be via written and training plans or videos. The membership also includes 2 monthly Zoom sessions for Q&A from participants. Some participants, depending on what level they want to join, they can submit their own submission of their videos training so that they can get live feedback. But I want this Q&A questions to be in general so that everybody enjoys learning about each other and we learn about dogs, which is a fascinating topic. Okay, as time allows and it arises during the Zoom calls, we'll expand again on that knowledge about dog and their behavior and the behavioral sciences. The program is open to all breeds and all ages, and one subscription can be used with more than 1 dog from the same household. So you're going to be working with your dogs independently, and that is fine. I don't see what the problem is with doing that. So this is the plan options. In the event that you are thinking this is something that interests you, you could do a monthly plan. Again, it has all the items that I mentioned previously. You don't have the opportunity to submit a video for me privately for feedback. And this is the fee for the month. If you want to do the 3-month plan, you could do, again, getting all the goodies that I mentioned. This is the fee. And you do get to submit videos. I'm sorry, for some reason that didn't show up, but you do get to submit 3 videos. And the 6-month plan, again, it includes the same items, but this time you get to submit 6 total videos. So you can submit 1 video a month, or it doesn't really matter anyways. And this is the fee for the 6-month plan. So I want to thank you again to joining me today. If you're interested in this program, you can sign up today. That's the link. There are limited spaces available. Registration is open now. This is a program that I don't run through the year. And the program will begin February 2024. Now, if you decide that you want to join before November 3rd, I want to offer you, as a way of thanking you, my course, How to Teach Your Dog to Walk on a Loose Leash.